Everybody, and welcome for joining us for today's session. Just going to wait for a minute or so. I can see that more attendees are logging in to the platform. So we'll get started in a few moments' time. So really looking forward to today's session. I hope you've got a cup of tea or coffee ready for the next hour. But we'll just wait just a few more moments.
So I'm sorry, I might just interrupt actually. Emily, we can't hear you. So
terribly sorry about that. So sorry about that. Let's start from the beginning.
But no sound.
Thank you. So I'd like to thank everyone for all the attendees for joining us today. And I'd also like to thank all of our panelists. So from Davies Consulting, we have Group Director Mike Hubbard and myself, Emily Target, as the Chair. And from Sensee, we are joined by CEO Mark Bolton. We're also joined by guest speakers as well. So I'd like to thank Mark Davies of Bupa, Melda Software of Vodafone, and we're also joined by John Wells of Cathay Pacific Airways. Thank you all. So let's introduce each of our speakers for today. So hi John, how are you today, and where are you joining us from?
Hi Emily, hi everybody. Yeah, I'm actually dialing from in London, though I'm normally based in Hong Kong, but I've been stranded here since the Hong Kong government banned flights from the UK back to Hong Kong. So I'm currently in London.
Perfect, and thank you so much for joining us today. And hi Melda, how are you today, and where are you joining us from?
Hi Emily, I'm joining from London. So I recently relocated from Istanbul to London. So yeah, and so excited. Thanks for it's been pleasure for me to be here.
It's great to have you join us today. And on audio, we are also joined by Mark Davies of Bupa. Hi Mark, can you hear me?
I can, Emily. Can you hear me?
Perfect, loud and clear. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, that's good.
How are you, and where are you joining us from?
I'm pretty good. I'm sorry that you can't see me. Probably a good thing for most of you, though. I'm in sunny Manchester in a office down near Salford Quays. So it's great to be joining today.
Beautiful. No, thank you so much for joining us today. And from Sensee, we have Mark Bolton. Hi, Mark. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks, Emily. Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, I'm sitting here in my office in Shropshire, where I've been for the last 14 months, pretty much. So, yeah, good to see everybody here.
Excellent. Thank you for joining. And finally, Mike Hubbard, how are you today, and where are you joining us from?
Hello, Emily. I'm good, thank you. And I think I win the Northern Award. I'm currently in the snowy Highlands of Scotland. So I am fingers crossed for a good signal. It's holding out so far. So yeah, no, thanks to everybody for joining, including our lovely audience who've joined us this afternoon or this morning.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Mike. What I'll do, I'm just going to move on to the agenda now. So today we have, there we go. So this is the outline of the agenda for today. So to begin with, we've just had the introductions, and then we're now going to go next on to what did 2020 do for outsourcing, the Davies perspective, then followed by in discussion with our industry panel. We'll then put your questions forward to each of the panel, and also the further information available. And last but not least, we'll also announce the winner of the Deliveroo Dinner winner. Just to let you know as well that this webinar session is being recorded and will be sent out to everyone that has registered, so please do keep a lookout for that. And also, if you do have any questions for any of our panelists during the session, please use the chat function, which is on the grey panel to the right. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Mike now, who will start the discussion on what did 2020 do for outsourcing, the Davies perspective.
Thank you, Emily, and again, thanks everyone for joining. Just by way of intro, I'm Group Director here at Davies Consulting, which many of you will know previously as the Ember Group. Delighted to work with some incredible brands around the world from our offices in North America and here in Europe, and thought that this session today in collaboration with Sensee was a really interesting one to pick up on, because through a lot of the conversations we've been having with our clients and with other organizations in our network, we have really uncovered a sense of challenge that's facing the BPO and the customer management outsourcing industry right now. And you know, maybe talking about the death of it might be a bit provocative, a bit extreme in language, but certainly the intention was to cause all of us to think hard about what's going on right now and how might we help shape a better future, either as the suppliers, the partners within this industry, or as the clients ourselves who are engaging the services of these organizations. And the next slide was just one that I used to use a lot, actually, and it I think has a lot of relevance, particularly when we look back at this last year of 2020. In that I picked this quote up from Laird Hamilton, a pro surfer who lives in Hawaii, who had this lovely quote that when he was thinking about surfing and he surfs these huge, gigantic waves, 80-foot plus tall, he's got the beautiful view of the Hawaiian beaches in front of him, the sun is on his back, he's riding his surfboard at speed, and his quote is, "Everything is okay," and of course it is, until it isn't. And you imagine just what the consequences are of not riding that wave properly, and what 80 foot of ocean swell feels like when it crashes down on you. And that feels like the sort of issue that the BPO industry has had to face over the past year or so, when everything was okay, but a lot of changes came along, of course, driven by COVID, and previously some of that driven by Brexit here in Europe as well. So I wanted to just question what did 2020 highlight for both the BPO community and the client community? Well, for the BPO community to start with, there are a number of things that I think we've identified as real challenges or areas that have changed or have moved the dial according to what they're doing. If we look at the first of those, it's really about delivery and relevance challenges. We've seen a lot of them have to shift rapidly to home working, where it just wasn't part of their model. We've seen them disrupted by alternatives, whether that's technology or gig CX or other new models coming in, and a lot of automation and digital has started to fill some of that resourcing gap filled by many of what I would call the old school BPO community. The second area of challenge that we've seen is around margin challenges, and they clearly have some legacy estate costs. They are paying for buildings now that they're either not using or that they plan to only partially use, where that used to be a big part of their cost advantage was by aggregating and consolidating clients into single buildings. So also a strong focus on direct costs, like all organizations really over the past year. The third area is around competitive challenges, and certainly there's been an oversupply in the market, but also a consolidation opportunity that we've seen with organizations looking to bring various players together, and that clearly could be a distraction or present some strategic challenges for the supply community. And the final area is one of relationship challenges, and you know, we've had lots of clients just say that, you know, there's been frustration in their relationship. They have been looking to find volume reduction initiatives There have been challenges around aligning the commercials and the contracts, and it feels like the COVID issue of 2020 has brought a lot of those into sharp focus and found them wanting. But the challenges are not just on the BPO side. Clearly, there have been some impacts to the client organizations. And the first of those is around risk mitigation. And, you know, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of business confidence issues, a lot of questions around business continuity and how many of them had to find rapidly different ways of working within just a few days back in February, March of last year. And we know that business confidence in May 2020 was the lowest it's been on record, and it's only recovered slightly since then, but it has been on a decline since, particularly in Europe, and since the Brexit era. But a lot of questions over how certain they can be about their own business future. The second area is around their operating model, and there's been service design issues, capacity issues, a lot of questions around reducing noise and taking waste contact out of their operations, a lot of cost pressures on both fixed and direct, and some questions around partnering needs as well, where, you know, linked to that relationship challenge idea on the BPO side, a misalignment on outcomes and what those contracts and commercials are driving. But also we're seeing clients frustrated by a lack of innovation and a lack of agility or flexibility through their partners. And the final challenge that they have as businesses about how they maintain their responsibilities and how they maintain their effectiveness. And that's raised questions of things like their own security, trust in the brand and their compliance obligations, a real sense of brand and purpose, but also dealing with customer stress. And that's certainly an area I'd expect Mark at Bupa to touch on later, but also staff engagement priorities and how you bring your own staff, but also your partner's staff on this journey of change and challenge. So that's the sort of the context. And I suppose it begs the question, do the current models of partnering actually deliver in that context? And I think the conclusion we reached here in Davies, at least, is no. Now, some clearly are adapting and proving themselves better than others. And we've actually seen examples of some really good support and innovation coming out of the outsourcing BPO CMO community. But we've also seen severe want as well. And I suppose one certain conclusion comes out of this is that uncertainty pervades at the moment, both for the supply community and the client community. And rather than outsourcing where historically it's been based on cost savings, it's really now, I feel, that the dial is shifting to one of risk mitigation and what can partners do to help address and align with those issues on the client side that I was just touching on, and how do those risks be eased and take some of that away. Now that puts certainly big challenges within the supply community to think about how they can adopt those risks at the same time as their own businesses might be challenged and clearly operating in uncertain times. So, you know, it raises some questions, but not ones that should go unconsidered in our view. And I suppose the important questions are, what problems are the supply community really setting out to solve? And as I've alluded to, I don't think now it's about cost saving per se, as it has been for many years. It really is about risk mitigation. And that therefore begs the question of what business is the supply community actually in? And if you think about it, there's a whole range of businesses. It might be one or more of these, but it could be about people supply. It could be in the transformation and change business. It could be advisory. It could be automation as the core business. It could be about digital, or it could be about providing infrastructure and facilities or solutions or analytics or venture investing, a whole range of options. But I think the important point is for the BPO community to be really clear on the value that they're offering and how they move from that cost reduction to a risk reduction and service continuity focus. And so, you know, I think some big questions arising here. And if we look at the next point that follows from this, it's really it just feels like my screen's frozen. Actually, I hope that hasn't happened for everybody. But it's to my point earlier, is that maybe it's not that it's dead, but it's a chance to reset and rise. So how does the supply community do this? And it's important to aim this question at the supply community, because the clients will be wanting the help, and they will be wanting partners of a certain capability to help them manage their way through the coming year and years. So if we move on to the next slide, it really says, as a specialist partner, I think there are three things that have become a virtuous circle, actually. Firstly, is you have to have a compelling and differentiated proposition. This is about being relevant, but also about standing apart and being innovative, being a partner rather than just a supplier and you know, a sourcing entity, but also about how you can assume the risk on behalf of your clients for what you are good at and are focused on delivering. So if you are really clear about that differentiated proposition, and you know, remember the old adage of if you stand for everything, you stand for nothing, that enables you to focus on specialist capabilities. And that means your investment works harder. It means you stand apart. Now, there's a whole range of ways, as I've said, that you can specialize, whether that's by sector or through a virtualized model or through analytics or automation or through gig provision or through multi-channel and the role of rich data, whatever it might be. That opportunity to specialize stands you apart. And that leads into the third area, which means that you can be commercially much more aligned, much more bold, and assume the risk from your client because of that specialist focus, because you have a differentiated story. And guess what? That creates more success, the opportunity to work with more clients, do more work, and you become, you know, part of a virtuous circle of you know, clear proposition, specialist capability, and commercial alignment. So if we then just move on, you can see, and we move on again, you can see that aligning that proposition with your capabilities and commercials is what creates relevant and compelling and compelling differentiation in the market. And that's the opportunity for the BPOs, but that clearly creates the opportunity for the client community. So in summary, it really does feel like the phoenix can arise from a lot of the challenges of 2020, and without trying to be too cliched or glib about it, it takes us from outsourcing and the idea of something out there that is just sourced to something that's in and fixing. It's integral, it's specialist, it's aligned, it's much more agile as a partner. It's clearly virtual, and that's one of the big new words, I guess, of 2020, and it's risk mitigating. And if I had to describe what I think is the future opportunity for customer management outsourcing, I think they're the words I would use to describe it moving forwards. And really interested to see how the panel think of this and how they're dealing with this opportunity within their own business. So I want to turn to Mark first, actually, from Sensee. Mark, thanks again for joining us and collaborating with us on this event. I thought, firstly, perhaps just a little bit about yourself and Sensee for those listening that might not know of the business. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that. So, I mean, we're a relatively small organisation in the sense that a lot of businesses out there may not have heard of us. We are a specialist in home working, and we've been doing this for about the last 16 years. So I actually came to this business just over 2 years ago. I've been in traditional outsourcing or traditional customer management contact centres for a number of years, over 20 years. And I think the thing that really impressed me most about Sensee was the fact that Sensee has this very, very different approach to customer management, which was based on an entirely virtual platform. So as you can imagine, up until sort of March of last year, we were busy trying to persuade organisations up and down the land in terms of the benefits of home working, not just business continuity based, but the general benefits from a customer management perspective. And then, of course, COVID struck, and businesses had to move to a virtual home working model. And so, as you can imagine, we've been extremely busy over the past 13 months. But yeah, we do everything to help organisations from an outsourcing, software as a service, and consultancy basis based on that home working model.
No, thanks, Mark. And I touched on, in my opening, I touched on the opportunity for differentiated and specialist services in outsourcing. And what's your view on that and how Sensee is set up to compete? I guess it's around that platform, is it?
Yeah, I mean, I think our view is and always has been that we are a specialist, a home working specialist, and I think that is still where we're at. That is still our sweet spot. So we saw a lot of organisations over the past 12 months do amazing things in terms of getting their contact centre workers, their advisors, working from home, getting the technology, getting the telephony sorted out so that they could work from home. But, and especially in the BPO sector, I think what we have a view of is that those organisations just have people working from home. We don't believe that they are truly home working. So we think there's a big gap between having your people working at home in a disaster situation that we have been in for 12 months and really doing this optimally and optimising on the benefits of true home working. And that still is where Sensee's expertise lies. And we're helping organisations to do that, not just from a BPO perspective, but helping organisations to get their own staff working from home optimally if it's appropriate for them to do so. So that really is our specialism.
Oh, interesting. And have you seen any shift in the way organisations look to engage your services since the beginning of last year? You know, how have you stood up to some of the challenges of COVID and how these organisations are engaging for your help?
Yeah, I think particularly right in the early stages of COVID, the organisations came to us because they just needed help. And so what we've tried to do is, yes, first and foremost, we're an outsourcer, but we've tried to act as a good partner to the industry. So our consultancy business has grown dramatically, and that's about imparting the knowledge of how to do home working optimally, regardless of whether you want to outsource it or whether you want to use your own staff as a client organisation. I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing is that a lot of organisations found the initial burst into home working relatively straightforward, but what our own clients and our own consultancy clients have been telling us is that things have moved on, and the honeymoon period was over a good 6 months ago. So a lot of organisations really started to experience challenges around things like staff engagement, people engagement, motivation, feeding into productivity. Mental health is a massive issue as cropped out. So the shift of how to homework, who to homework with, who should perhaps shouldn't homework, all of those sorts of things I think have really come to the fore. I think the other thing that's really struck us is businesses want to outsource in a different way, perhaps rather than the traditional model. And so what we've tried to do is try to be a good partner to either our clients and or our prospects. Because each business wants to do this slightly differently. So some people want to do it with, you know, the hybrid thing is the thing that we're moving towards. But where does the outsourcer fit into that? And so what we've tried to do is not be prescriptive. And if an organisation wants to start off by setting up an outsource relationship, but then move that to perhaps an in-house relationship, it's how do you do the build, operate, transfer model. So it's about being flexible in terms of how we contract with our clients, and as long as we're doing what is right for both parties, it's usually a successful outcome.
And it sounds like, you know, some of those ideas that you mentioned, like health and well-being of your staff, you know, mental health as a big issue, obviously. It sounds like you think they're here for the long term. These aren't just, you know, short-term responses to what went on last year. They're going to be key traits of an outsourcing organisation into the future. Is that your view?
Yeah, I mean, I think I said at the beginning, but our view is that home working, if you set it up properly, you do it in the right way, the people who are your home workers are the right people to be home workers, who perhaps are not necessarily the same as the people who are working in your physical brick and mortar organisations. Our view is that the benefits of home working, when done properly, can deliver a far better result than in a brick and mortar BPO traditional outsource model. And what I mean by that is much higher levels of quality, a much higher quality model in terms of customer interaction, because of the people that you can pull into this now that you're not limited by geography. The fact that you can operate this so much more efficiently, you no longer need to operate shift patterns, you can operate on demand, 30-minute scheduling and staffing like we do, makes it very efficient. So it's not a low cost model, but it's very, very efficient. And the fact that you can be flexible and agile, which is ultimately why I think clients are moved to outsourcing, because they need that flexibility and that agility. And I completely agree with what you said. It's no longer about getting volume bodies available at a low cost. I think if you want to do that, we're seeing that's happening through organizations moving offshore and through automation and digitization and self-serve. But the way that we're moving, and I think the industry will move, is very much about what do you do when that journey breaks down, and how do you provide a very high quality, perhaps higher skill set than you would normally be able to attract into traditional brick and mortar outsource contact center. So that's the way that we see things moving here.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, well, thank you for that. Let's move on to ask some of your industry colleagues about their take on it. So I want to thank, and I'll come back to you with some of the audience questions later, Mark, but for now, thank you. So I'd like to move across to Mark Davies from Bupa. So thanks again for joining us, Mark, and perhaps first please just outline your background and role at Bupa and the operation.
Yeah. Sure, Mike. Yeah, I am the customer contact director for Bupa's UK insurance business. So I have about 1,000 colleagues working as part of my team that are serving customers for anything that they need post-sale. So the vast majority of our interactions are around authorising treatment for customers across all sorts of segments, from consumer all the way through to our big corporate clients, and that treatment could range from anything from seeing a physio to end of life cancer care. So very, very wide ranging and a very complicated set of processes in a regulated industry. So yeah, it's a really great organisation to work for, but very challenging, I think, for the teams, and we've felt those challenges over the past 12 months, like many others.
Yeah, well, I mean, a critical organisation, I guess, for the last 12 months. And what about service outsourcing? What use do you make of that? I suspect that you have some very specific needs, often highly sensitive, in depth around health, financial, medical. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So I joined the company about 3.5 years ago into this job, and at that time we'd actually been working with Sensee, actually, before Mark was running it for probably the previous 2 years, relatively small scale, and we've continued to grow that relationship since I've joined, and the Sensee team now are probably around 100 of my 1,000 colleagues, and we consider them colleagues of Bupa in the same way as our own people, and they serve our customers in the same way. And actually, the reason I think we've put more into that is that it works. I think for some of the reasons that Mark talked about. I've worked with more bricks and mortar outsourcers in my previous roles and organisations. Never worked with an organisation like Sensee. Very niche, certainly in my experience previously, to have a exclusively home working workforce. I think where it's benefited us really, really well, actually, is that because of the challenging nature of the role, we've been able to access a larger labour pool to choose from, right? Because we've got 2 big operational sites. Again, you're restricted to that geography, and that does us pretty well. But having the ability to go beyond that has been really helpful. I think also the agility in working hours across a week or a month. We're quite a seasonal business, although it feels like we're always busy at the moment, and therefore having an ability to have some flexibility, more flexibility than probably our permanent contracts allow us to have staff that might work a little bit more in the first week of the month than they will do in the middle 2 weeks of the month, and very much that complements the way that the Sensee team work. I think we have had a need over the past 12 months for some specific intervention and some rapid stand-up of quite dedicated teams to do specific project works for us. And again, we've utilised the relationship we've got largely with Sensee to do that. We're quite a risk-averse organisation. We don't like to take lots of chances with things, and I think the relationship that we've had, it's taken us quite a long time to build that up to the place it is now, but as it works, we try and leverage it even more so. So yeah, it's I definitely see a future for it. I think the final thing I would say on it is, when it came to the initial lockdown last March, we had fortuitously in our kind of in-office teams, we'd started a trial maybe 6 months prior to that to introduce home working for our permanent colleagues, not on a permanent basis, but for a kind of hybrid model. And the reason for that was actually more about work-life balance for our people. So a lot of our people said that they had to commute quite a long way to get to either of our city centre locations, and we could give them time back probably more easily than we could give them money. So looking to try and introduce home working is something we started, and we leveraged the platform that the Sensee guys had worked from. And actually, when it came to the first lockdown, we were able to very quickly stand up everyone else in our workforce within a month. And I think without that, I guess that linkage and experience of working with a partner like Sensee and some of the experimentation we'd done, I think it would have taken us far longer. So again, really helped us to be responsive to that quicker than we might have been.
Interesting. And have you been prompted to look at different operating models through this period? You're talking about being risk averse, but we're going gently into home working. What about, the role of automation and sort of further digitization or other models? Is the organization now perhaps ready to experiment or test more, new models?
Yeah, no, sure. I think if I look at it from an industry perspective, I spent 15 years before this in retail banking. Health insurance is not as progressed as some other industries in automation. We've got some digital services that we're accelerating in the same way as our competitors are, and we'll continue to do that. I do think, though, having learned a little bit more about the health insurance industry in the past few years, it's a bit of a double-edged sword for us, because as much as we want to create some flexibility for our members and our customers to access their care without speaking to someone, we trade very heavily as an organisation on the service we do give when our customers need us. So pretty much every customer that calls us has something the matter with their health. That's why they're contacting us to access that healthcare. And our ability to engage and make an impact on those people, I think, is often where our USP comes in. So I think where we're really trying to focus, and where I'm trying to I guess major with my teams, is how do we use automation to enhance the human to human experience. We have net promoter score in the high 60s, which is great, but we do that because when customers need us, we're there for them and we can help them. So it's how do we kind of blend it. So I almost see, rather than pure scale digitization of interactions in the way that maybe I would have seen in my previous industries that I've worked in, how we can use digitization to make those experiences a bit more seamless and a bit less clunky. And that's where we're trying to go, pushing our digital apps and other digital servicing that we're developing.
Interesting. Thank you, Mark. Look, for now, we'll leave it there, and we'll come back to you with these questions. But that's great. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to move on to Melda at Vodafone. Thank you to you, Melda, again for joining us. And perhaps again, as with the others, just outline your role and background at Vodafone and the operations that you have there. It's a global role that I believe you have.
Yeah. First of all, thank you. I want to thank you all for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. Yes, recently I transferred from Vodafone Turkey to Vodafone Group to lead the transformation projects in the customer operations across the markets. So I started my career as an agent 21 years ago. So I got different roles in the operations, such as team leader, supervisor, location manager, customer experience manager, etc. Before moving to group, I worked as the senior manager at Vodafone Turkey, responsible for all customer operations, around 4,000 people across Turkey, including in-house operations, outsourced partners, management and process improvement development projects. So I've been involved in many different value-added projects in the customer operations. And also I'm currently working on my PhD thesis, how the evaluation of the digitalization and virtualization will affect the service quality and organizational culture. So really COVID helped me to like a real experimental, just the learning and the outcomes, right? So, and also I worked as a lecturer in 2 universities in Istanbul. In short, I can definitely say, yeah.
Monday's covered. What do you do with the rest of the week, Melda?
So, but in short, I can definitely say I describe myself as an advocate of the customer operations, because I'm coming from the backstage of the operations and I'm really proud of that. So I feel so lucky that I can understand the facts of the operations and how it is important for the companies and for the customers.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Thank you. So what about outsourcing? What degree of dependency is there on outsourcing, and how's it used in Vodafone?
We have a great and strong ecosystem with our partners. So we saw and realized it's important once again during the COVID. So while everything was going very well in the beginning of 2020, COVID suddenly hit the operations, as did all over the world, right? So during the first COVID lockdown, we and our outsourcing partners successfully transitioned all our call center agents to home working in a very short time. To ensure business continuity for our customers. But it has been really, to be honest, very tough days and nights for us, for all of us. So we couldn't have done it without the tight relationship with our partners. So the importance of this relationship become abundantly clear during these crisis situations, because our employees and their health has always been our first priority. So we transitioned all our operations first to focus on the health and well-being of our agents. So we are managing our customer operations right now virtually, all home working, and continuing to deliver high quality customer service. So we are running all our activities while home working, which is, I think, great. So we can do all our activities from home working. We have a mixed working model, both in-house and outsource. We have a transparent relationship and mutual passion. So if you have a, this kind of transparent relationship and mutual passion, you become one team with your partners. And this has always been our way of working with our outsourced partners. So the COVID-19, we learned a lot about how great team we are. So we work together, looking in the same direction, always employees and the customers coming first. So I can definitely say all our operations and our partners have done an excellent job to keep operations live, and we are so proud of it.
Brilliant. Well, look, I also understand that Vodafone has its own internal shared service operation, VOIS, that provides customer management support to some of your markets. So, that I presume was part of that ecosystem that you referred to. Does that get managed in any different way, or does that offer you something as a partner that you don't get elsewhere from the ecosystem?
So we are working during the COVID-19. So each market rules and situations was different from each other. So we manage all the transition to home working locally. So the all actions just we identified locally. So we worked and contribute with our partners, power together with our outsourced partners, our company voice, and we relied on their local expertise, to be honest, and this trust help us to succeed in this shift in a very short time. And also flexibility, you already mentioned, I think it's really very important. So flexibility, the new normal necessary for all of us, right? So our partners helped us with agility across the markets. So from the local market view, I can definitely say the same, thought on that. So while I was managing the local markets, so I had the opportunity to take an action, one passion, which is for our people and their health. So we act and we get it done together with all our ecosystem partners, people, all our staff together.
And similar to what I asked Mark, actually, but have you been prompted to look at different operating models and the role of automation, for example, or gig CX or other commercial models through this last year? And has that changed your thinking about what you want from partners?
Yeah, exactly. So COVID absolutely taught us to look differently at the situations, right? Before COVID, we never believed that we can shift the whole operations to home working in 2 or 20 days, right? So I'm optimist in this kind of crisis. We struggled a lot. We lost our loved ones maybe, but we came out of it stronger and more decisive than before COVID, I think. So we operate with hope for the future, because we had it was a really experimental learn, and this experimental learn encouraged us to go one step further, to be more brave. So we tried lots of different working models, such as flexible shifts, gig working, unique business models, and we succeeded at them very well. So, so for the going forward, our goal is to scale these different and flexible business model that we tested during the COVID and make them the primary way of working going forward. So on the other hand, these flexible working models let us to reach different profiles across the markets, right? So we increase our diversity at the operations. I'm really very happy to see that. So for example, our agents can choose their own working hours and time periods, giving them more flexibility to them. So I think the world is changing from the work is not fits your life. So the life doesn't fit your work. The work is fits your life, right? So I think this kind of flexible working options really engage the people, so attract the new people. So yeah, we will definitely scale this new way of working.
Thanks, Madhu. Look, I have to say, you are definitely one of our most positive clients. You're full of enthusiasm and energy, so that's to be applauded. So thank you for joining us today. We will come back if we have time for questions, but I just want to now move on to our final panelists joining us today. And as an astute audience, I think you'll all notice that we don't have Matthew Briggs from DWP with us today. Matthew unfortunately got called off to an executive board meeting, but I'm really delighted to say that John Wells from Cathay Pacific stepped in at very short notice. So John, thank you again for joining us. So again, as with the others, perhaps just outline your background and role at Cathay and the operations that you have there. Now, occasionally there's a delay on the line, but I'm sure it's not that long. Are you there, John? Hello, John, can you hear me? If you were in Hong Kong, I might understand this delay, but I think as you're in the UK.
Oh, yeah, no, you just went mute there for a minute, Mike. But yeah, just to introduce myself. I think probably,
thank you. Yeah.
Probably what you asked me to do. Yeah. So I've been with Cathay for just about 2 years now as their head of global customer care. I'm responsible for the day-to-day operations of their hubs and satellites, as well as the digital transformation program that we're putting in place. It's a mixture of in-sourced, as some of the other panelists have said, a mixture of in-sourced and outsourced operations that we have based around 5 main hubs in and around China, Far East, and also into Europe, and then a number of satellite sites where we service some of our smaller markets and smaller languages. Yes, that's pretty much my background. Prior to that, I was with British Airways for 20 odd years and running their contact centres for the last 5 years of that.
Thanks, John. And hopefully you can hear me okay now, but how did 2020 impact you operationally, and how did you respond? And I suppose through that, what dependency was there on your partners, and how did they adjust for you?
Yeah, it'd be a similar story to probably some of the other panelists and probably many people listening in. To begin with, bearing in mind, obviously, we're based in China. This hit us very early in the piece when it came across China and Hong Kong. So the initial piece, the same as everyone else, was a massive increase in the number of contacts from an operational perspective, and just trying to deal with those. And a couple of things that kind of was more reinforced rather than learnings in my mind. One was that a customer contact operation is never going to be able to deal with the scale and upsurge in demand that some of these big disruption events it cause. That was kind of a reality we were dealing with anyway, but that would just kind of reinforce that principle, and also therefore reliance on our outsource. And I've always thought our outsource as not suppliers, as partners. I think a couple of the other panelists have also said that they're part of the team, and I think that's absolutely vital that they're treated in exactly that manner. So initially we had this big upsurge, and it was working with our partners to be as agile, and we've used the word as flexible as possible about trying to get extra resourcing to support those contacts. But what then became quite apparent was, as particularly in aviation, where that was quite a short, sharp, when I say short, probably about 2 or 3 months worth of increase in contacts, then as flying, international flying and domestic flying for that matter, has dropped off all over the world. Obviously, without the flights, without the customers, you're not going to get the contacts. And that led us more into, and again, it wasn't necessarily a change in focus, but more an acceleration in our move to digitization, and that model in particular, going back to my point about scale. Aviation has maybe different from Mark and Bupa in that sort of way, but as a number of transactional activities which are pretty prime for digitization, but also it's absolutely key, and that we need to have those self-service solutions in place, so that when we do have customers who need that human-to-human interaction, that we have trained, qualified agents with emotional intelligence to recognise the situation and deal with it, and that becomes crucial for me. And it's again exactly it's the interaction between the digital and the human interaction, and making sure that we kind of utilise each one effectively at the right moment is crucial. So it wasn't necessarily a change; it was more the second half of 2020 with a more quiet operational environment enabled us to focus very much on this digitisation and move to rolling out WhatsApp, for example. It's been a big move for us, and customers have adopted to it very, very well.
So I guess you've got a range of partners that you've talked about. What have you learned from the good and the not so good through this period, and what would you look for therefore from an outsourced partner in the future, for learning from how you worked with them through 2020?
So I think we're lucky. We work with three specific outsourcers, and actually they're all very good through this process. I think the bit that really made the difference was, and again we talked about it, it's the agility and the flexibility of the situation. And obviously from a contractual perspective, as much of that can be built into the contract from the outset, and in the alignment of your goals is crucial. But I'd like to meet the procurement person who said they've managed to build a contract which would have dealt with the COVID situation. I think it was completely unprecedented, and therefore you need partners and yourselves to be able to look beyond the criteria and the constraints of a contract as a true partner relationship, and say, okay, how can we manage this differently going forward, and not necessarily put the contract away, but just say, look, no, we're both in here for the long term. And if you have that established relationship built on performance and trust, I think you can then say, okay, look, no, contractually it's not quite what we were looking to do, but we can, particularly to begin with, it was about getting manpower in. To the back end of the year, it was about trying to take cost out of the business. Aviation is struggling, as everyone knows, and therefore just trying to manage our costs is crucial. And all of our partners have really stepped up to the plate about trying to work with us to try and reduce that cost footprint that we have at the moment. And as I say, and it was to the detriment of their own financial book as anything else. So it's that ability to look at the bigger picture and be flexible and look beyond the confines of the contract, I think is kind of reinforced to me the quality of the partner that you want to work with.
Really interesting. And I presume your hoping that there is now a period of growth coming. I guess, you know, people travel again, and you're looking at how your resourcing is supporting that growth agenda rather than the
yeah,
cost.
I think yeah, exactly right. And I think everyone understands, you know, very clearly the pent-up demand. I think all of us who've been confined to our homes and whatever for the last 14 months are dreaming of a holiday of some sort. So I think we all view it would be leisure-led, any recovery in travel, but I think there's a big pent-up demand for it. So how we're resourced to do that. I do think the home working model is, we were lucky. It's something we'd looked at beforehand, which enabled us to move quite quickly when they struck. But due to the nature of some of the accommodation you get out in the Far East, taking calls from home is more difficult, just because you have potentially multiple generation people living in our homes, don't have the space to be able to do it. But our move to digital messaging and things like that enables a lot greater flexibility about working from home. So, you know, again, I think for us a hybrid model is what we would look to do, and that would be both for our outsourcers and internal as well, about how we do that, which could be a combination of a full remote-based team. Some of our people have been offered that and were desperate to come back to the office, and they want to work in the office, and we would probably keep that, and then probably a mixture of the two, so we have that resilience built into our operation as well. So I think we saw this with one of our outsourcers based in the Philippines, and when we first established a relationship with them, it was it had to be an office-based thing, and they had COVID in the Philippines has been very badly hit, and they had to get everyone working from home, and there's been a realization within Cathay that also works very well. So I think it gives us a flexibility in the resourcing model as well, which we will need as recovery comes.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We've heard from many clients about challenges in certain geographies to do with the practicalities of home working. So yeah, no, really interesting, John. Thank you. Look, I think we've got time, Emily, for you know, 2 or 3 questions from the audience. So thanks again to everyone that sent them in. Emily, do you want to just sort of fire up and see if we've got some questions to dish out?
Yes, first of all, thank you to everyone that submitted a question. We've had some brilliant questions come through. So we'll start with a question for Melda. So Ryan Mosley from Trusted Group Holding, his question is, will things ever go back to how it was, or are industries changed forever?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you. So exactly, COVID accelerated digitalization for sure, but I think it accelerated the adaptation of the capabilities as well, right? So I think nothing will be the same as before. So definitely, so as I mentioned, I'm really optimistic for the going forward, because I think we will enjoy the life more than before, because we will spend our time more efficiently, we will work more efficiently, we will have enough time to focus on ourselves, right? So I think going forward, especially the human centricity will raising, and we will explore what we need, what we want, and we can have much more time to spend for us and what we need.
Thank you, Melda. We've got another question here, and this one is for Mark Walton. The question is from Rohit Rakar from Comparison Technologies Limited. And his question is, do we truly feel the cost savings of the BPO industry can be countered with the pivots in working styles we've seen through 2020 into 2021?
That's another good question. I think if we think about the cost savings that organisations can make through moving to a virtual model, a purely home-based model, all of the calculations that we have looked at suggest that you can probably take about 10% out of your cost base. So if you're a traditional BPO provider, a traditional outsourcer, you can possibly take 10% out of the cost of delivering the service. I think the real opportunity from home working, when it's done properly and strategically, and I think this feeds through from the model that we deliver for our clients, is that the actual cost saving opportunity comes from the efficiencies and the flexibility. So it's fundamentally about, you know, as Sensee do, we don't operate fixed shift patterns. We do 30-minute staffing and scheduling, and that means that you can meet your customer peaks in traffic, but because you're not a shift pattern, you can flip between half hours so that you can up and down the resource available in a very flexible way intraday. So it keeps it very, very tight and efficient. I think the second half of the question is that really, although you can deliver cost savings, I think somewhere in the region of 20 to 25% lower than an in-house model when you think of all of the on costs of employment. So outsourcing, I think generally is a good thing, but it's bigger than that. It's more about the quality of the people that you pull into the model. And what is the cost actually, if you're not, rather than just comparing like for like, what is the cost of being able to resolve your customer's query first time of asking? What is the cost and the value of being able to deliver a really high quality customer experience? So I think when it's looked at in the round rather than value rather than cost, I think our view would be that it's hugely beneficial on both those fronts, cost and value.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Mark. We've got time for one more question. We've got a question here for John. It was originally asked for Matthew at DWP, but hope you can answer this from Cathay's perspective. So this question is from Louise Hutchinson of Serco. Does Cathay Pacific envisage utilising a fully home worker solution in any of their outsourced contracts?
Thank you, Reece. Good question. I sort of touched on this a little bit when in my discussion with Mike. That one of our outsourcers originally, our thinking had been completely, it was an office-based team, and we've been quite clear in our original contracting. That's what we wanted to do. COVID, as in so many things, were challenges thrown up as also opportunities, and one of those was when they had to work from home because they had COVID case within the building. They very quickly moved to working from home, and they have been doing that since July last year, and they are still working from home. So I think from an outsource point of view, it's opened our eyes to the fact that it's a possibility. My preference, again, which I also touched on, is still probably around a hybrid model. I think, as maybe Mark described, working with a dedicated remote team, be it with like the Sensee or just your in-house team who are dedicated remote, giving you that reach and demographic as well as geographic reach. I think is important, as well as getting a mix and culture of the team as well around by having people in the office and working from home to drive that efficiency. So I think it's now certainly a possibility, but I think probably for me anyway, and Cathay, I think more the hybrid model is probably the way we'd go.
Great, thank you very much, John, for your answer. So that's all we've got time for today for the Q&A session. Thank you to all the panel for their responses. So got some more information on our website if you require any further information on outsourcing. So we've got some content on there that is ready to download. We'll be sending out a recording of this session shortly after. Okay, so the time has arrived. Those who submitted a question when registering were automatically entered into a prize draw to win a £100 delivery gift card. So thank you to all of those that submitted a question, but I can announce that the winner is Rohit Rakar. So congratulations. We shall be in touch shortly, directly after this session, to arrange your prize. So well done. Okay, so it'd be great to keep the conversation going. So if you have any questions or would like to speak to Mike or Mark from Sensee directly, please do feel free to get in touch. So I'd like to thank Mike and Mark and guests Mark, Melda and John. And thank you to our audience for attending today. And we look forward to welcoming you to next session. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, bye.
Right.